When he was revealed, he taught them about the Father, the uncontainable one, and breathed into them what's in the thought, doing his will. When many had received the light of his revelation and the teaching about the Father, about how he is outside of anyone's ability to control him, and he's uncontainable, uh, when they had received this light, when they had breathed into him what was in the thought, they turned to him again because they turned towards the light. They turned towards the truth. They understood what was in the thought. They were about doing his will. For the material ones who were strangers and didn't see his form or know him. So again, the spiritual ones understand the Father. They understand the revelation of the Son, the knowledge of the Father. They see him. In other words, they understand that he is the Word, and they recognize his pattern. They hear him. They understand the secret language. They taste of him and grasp him. But fleshly people do not. They only see the fleshly level. And this is basically why we never got the mystery until now, because it was revealed early in the church age, and then of course there was the age of the interim. And now, if you can see him, touch him, taste him, recognize him, if he becomes revealed to you, if you receive the teaching of him, right, then you can begin to understand his incorruptibility. Again, he came by means of fleshly form. He came as a living parable. What Jesus was a living parable of the Logos. The Logos became flesh and dwelt among us and was not recognized. Nothing could block his path. You think about like how many times he was cornered in a crowd, and it says that he walked right through them. All right, now they're speaking kind of metaphorically. They weren't able to detain him for whatever reason. He was able to just walk right through them. This again is a metaphor because those people basically represent the age and also worldly people in general, people who only see him in terms of the flesh. Because he came in the flesh and what was told about him was preserved on the fleshly level and taught on the fleshly level and understood on the fleshly level. I think a lot of the evil people, the nefarious people or whatever, thought that they had conquered him by means of reducing him to the fleshly level. But because in the flesh he was a living parable, it meant that everything he did in the flesh, everything he did in a fleshly form, carried with it a higher level meaning. So, in effect, by lowering him to the level of the flesh, they had not defeated him. They had only taken the mystery and hidden it to be revealed, of course, in the Father's time. Moreover, he said new things when he spoke about what was in the Father's heart and brought out the complete word. So again, the Father spoke of three generations. Again, we get that from the patterns that we talked about earlier, the threefold patterns. Again, the three items in the Ark of the Covenant, the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and various other things which indicate that the revelation would be in three parts. And then Jesus came along and continued the thought. For example, when he's at the Mount of Transfiguration, who does he take with him? He takes with him James, Peter, and John, those three. Then he appears, of course, with Moses and Elijah. So here you have Moses, Jesus, of course, and Elijah on the Mount of Transfiguration. And below him, you have Peter, James, and John, the two sons of Zebedee. Again, do we see the same pattern, past, present, and future, the one who is, was, and is to come? A threefold manifestation. Yes, Jesus taught the threefold manifestation there too, because of course Moses preceded Jesus on the timeline, so he would represent that first covenant. Jesus, of course, represents himself, that second covenant, and also he speaks of Elijah who has come, and he was referring to John the Baptist. That's the first revelation, the revelation of the Son, because John the Baptist was all about, this is the Messiah. I'm not worthy to carry his sandals, etc. The one who's coming after me was before me. He was all about the Son. Then he also speaks of an Elijah who is to come, who is to set all things right. Again, anytime you see anything to come, again, I will give you to eat of the hidden manna, etc. Anything that's a future testament or anything that's a future revelation represents that third one. And with so again, you have Moses first, then Jesus, and then Elijah again, who is to come. So, and then across from them, down below, you see Peter, James, and John. Now, Peter is associated with Jesus because again, when he's on his way to Caesarea Philippi, he says to all the people, "Hey, who do men say that I am?" And some of them say, "Hey, you're Elijah or one of the prophets or Jeremiah come back to life." And then he says, "Well, who do you say that I am?" Specifically to Peter. Um, and Peter answers, "Well, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says to him, "Well, flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father, which is in heaven, has revealed this to you." And he says, "And blessed are you, because flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father, which is in heaven. And I say to you that you are Peter," which means rock or stone, "and upon this rock will I build my church." So again, you have Peter associated with the church, which is very interesting. So that connects in that particular pattern. That connects Peter with the church, with Jesus, of course, who is the second revelation, who represents the second revelation. And at the end of John, we see something very interesting. There is this sort of conflict and rivalry, it seems, between Peter and John. But the long and the short of it is, Jesus reveals to Peter about the death that he must undergo in order to bring honor to his name. And Peter asks about John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, and he says, "Well, what about him?" And Jesus says to him, "Well, if it should be my will that he should remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." So if Peter represents the church, then John represents the one who is to come. So John lines up with Elijah. So again, John is sort of a future thing. So he represents the elect. So Peter represents the church and John represents the elect. Therefore, James, who is the other son of Zebedee, by default would correspond to Moses. And so he would represent sort of the Old Testament. So again, he's basically saying the same thing. He's talking about the threefold revelation. But again, he's not only speaking about what's in the Father's heart, he's also bringing about the completeness of the revelation. He's talking the same thing. He's talking about a revelation which is to come, which basically is the Word in its fullness, the complete Word. So when the light spoke by his mouth, or through his mouth, and by his voice gave birth to life. Again, the language that he's speaking, if you're picking up on the hidden language, he's going to give birth to life. That is to say, he's supporting that third revelation. He's speaking of it through his secret language, through his voice. He gave them thought, wisdom, mercy, salvation, and the spirit of power from the infinity and sweetness of the Father. So again, he's saying the same things that the Father has said. He says, the Father's works that I do likewise. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So he's basically seconding what the Father has said, and he's spoken of words for the future, giving birth to those of us at the end of time, giving us life. That is to say, the knowledge of the Scriptures and the power to bring about this change. Our thoughts, therefore, are different. Our wisdom, therefore, is complete. His mercy has come about in his revelation to us, and therefore his salvation. That is to say, he's rescued us from this blindness, this fog, this world, and given us the spirit of power from the infinity and sweetness of the Father. Because again, the fact that he called it from the beginning speaks to his infinity, and the fact that it brings us thought, wisdom, mercy, salvation, and the spirit of power speaks to his sweetness. That is to say, the care that he took for us in laying out a plan to rescue us. He caused punishments and torments to cease because they led astray into error and bondage those who needed mercy. Again, because of the sweetness of the Father, his desire is for mercy. His desire is not for judgment. He wants the punishments and torments to end. And how does he bring that about? Well, again, through the revelation of the thought, the giving us of wisdom, the showing us of mercy, etc. He dissolved and confounded them with knowledge. That is to say, those who brought us the ignorance, those who brought us the confusion, the forgetfulness, those who tried to rob us of our spiritual sight and our spiritual power and our spiritual life, those who tried to keep us down. And so he became a way for those who were led astray. In other words, he is, in a sense, the path, the way, the truth, and the life, of course. And knowledge for those who were ignorant. Again, those who were in this age of ignorance were ignorant, but he became knowledge for us. A discovery for those who were searching. Again, they weren't going to teach this in the church. This wasn't going to come down through tradition exactly. This was going to come down by means of him living as a parable of the word in the flesh, and a strength for those who were wavering. Again, strength through what? Through the power, the spirit of power. For those who were wavering. Again, there's no reason to waver if you have the truth. You can stand on the word and you can stand on its certainty. And a purity for those who were impure. Again, we were made impure by the error. We were defiled, if you will, by the wrong information, the wrong teaching, the wrong thought, the wrong knowledge, the wrong insight. And so, in becoming, if you will, a living parable, if you will, of the logos, of the knowledge, and being a discovery, if you will, for those who were searching. In other words, they found in him, in his words, in his deeds, something greater, something better. And so they were purified from their defilement. They were made to see, they were made to hear, they were lifted up, etc. So he's helping us quite a bit by giving us himself as a sacrifice to be glorified again at the third revelation.